Hey everybody, this is Lee with the Live All Good podcast, coming back for November with our monthly Move the Needle podcast episode. In the next episode, we have a roundtable discussion on how to bridge the gap of such a divide in this country right now. And we also talk about ideas on how to stay engaged after the vote. I hope everybody finds this episode insightful. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, everybody. Welcome back from that quick break. This is Move the Needle, our monthly podcast. And today's episode is really about bridging this gap. There's a huge divide going on in the country right now. And also over the last few episodes, we've talked about a lot of heavy subject matter. And we want to take some time to process things. We want to, I think, just start understanding each other so that we can work together and move forward. On today's episode, we have Henry Clemens and Janelle Hengefeld, my co-hosts. How are you guys today?
Hello. Good.
Doing well.
Awesome. We are also joined by Megan Adams. How are you?
Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So, guys, I want to put this out there to you guys. We all seen what is going on the last week or so with the election and voting and all that stuff. What I want to kind of put out there first is there are still people out there who are angry, who are hurt, who feel abandoned maybe or not listened to. Like, how do we begin to? One thing that we had mentioned that I had mentioned before in some past episodes is it's all good to call people out, right? But we want to try to make sure we then call them in so that they understand that we're hearing them and that they're part of the work that has to be done together. How do we do that? How do we bridge this gap so that we can understand and listen to each other? Any thoughts, any ideas about that?
I have an idea, and this is going to be based in my experience and someone who's worked as executive, with as many as 50, 60 people working under me.
Sure.
And managing very complicated projects and creating businesses. And in my experience, even if we look at the physics of the situation, energy always flows into lowest stable point. Like, for example, you put a few drops of oil on top of water, and then each piece of oil kind of pushes pressure on the water, and it takes more energy for the water, the surface tension, to hold individual drops than to coalesce all of the drops into one drop, which is why you'll always see oil droplets slowly over time coalescing into one piece on top of water. And so the way that, human psychology works in a very similar manner. And people do not like, in general, the masses do not like to forge their own path. They do not like to create their own vision. Working in businesses, I've noticed, and I've made the mistake before of creating a business whereby I have to be there in order for people who could do it on their own. But if I'm not there, nothing gets done, right? And this is because psychologically they're looking for the lowest of least energetic friction. And that's not always the most inspiring place to be, but it's the easiest place to be, to always
Absolutely.
be passing off, passing the buck as much as people can and just sliding by, right? And so
Yeah.
part of what I see, and I think when I look back at, let's talk about, Gandhi's Salt Satyagraha, and the Satyagrahis in Gandhi's work, his entire peace project, and then Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They had a clear vision. They had a clear place for everybody to. And you say, look, we're going for, these very understandable and attainable, realizable goals. And they fall within a greater vision where the future, all of the details are unclear. But there are these very specific details, like, for example, with Gandhi's peace movement, it started off with a number of smaller steps, and then they were allowed to go and harvest and make salt in a place that was controlled by the British. It was a big power move by the British to not allow them to make the salt. And so they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And this is a milestone. This is a very visual, realistic cue that we know that we're making the progress. And following these very clear pathways, that process is what eventually caused the British Empire to withdraw from India. And in the same way with the movement here in the 60s, say, well, we want integrated schools. We want integrated lunch counters, I mean, as insane as that is.
Right. No, right. But something that simple. Yeah.
But they're
I got
markers,
you.
right, of something greater. So I think part of the issue now, don't, and maybe people do, maybe I haven't heard it yet, but everything feels murky right now. Like a lot of people, and I'd say even a lot of people who support the Republican agenda, still, even in this moment,
still murky.
Yeah. They're not necessarily hate-filled racists,
No.
They're not they're scared. They're very concerned about their financial future, fed an amount of propaganda that is, gosh, when I started actually hearing some of the stuff, I was like,
it's so filled with conspiracy theory. Well, Henry,
which is a huge
business. Yeah, big time. I wanted to jump in here because while you were talking about that, what it made me think about is, and this is for any of our listeners, right, or anyone who we are coming into contact with, because you hit it right on the head with, I agree with you that I refuse to believe that I have Republican friends, and I refuse to believe that they are certain supporters. They might have a different ideology, but it's not formed in racism or that kind of thing. So what I was thinking about, and again, this is something really, really simple, but it can start with, because there's such distrust that's been sown through the fabric of our country at the moment. What is the best way to provide, or not even provide, but spark trust, right? It's gratitude. And what is a great way to invite everyone into gratitude? Random acts of kindness. But even further than that, what I would like us to do is invite, again, any listeners, or ourselves included, right? On a specific day of the week is that random act of kindness day, where it could be Thursday, right? I don't know. And so every Thursday, it's a random act of kindness. And that is when you start drawing people in one at a time, because they will first think you're crazy for doing this random act of kindness. Why? I don't deserve it. Who are you? Never seen you before. But I don't know. I mean, that's just what I was thinking of, because that is enough to draw someone into this sphere of, wait a minute, everybody's not evil. Does that make sense, or do I just sound like I'm off the chain here? That's what that was really, when Henry was talking about that. That was just beating in my head. Random act of kindness, and inviting people to do that.
With conspiracy theorists, I said, with bridging the gap, they should be included in this too. And I do not like labels. I'm not a fan of labeling really anything. But I could be considered a conspiracy theorist. So I think that there's really truth in everybody's story a little bit. And so I think that maybe just opening up our minds to everyone.
And bringing people in instead of trying to be exclusive and leave people out.
Really, I'm seeing white people talk about white people, black people talk about black people. I see white people that have white guilt. I see, I'm just stepping back and just like, holy camole. I just think that we need to just have a little kumbaya moment. I don't know, but the labels I think would be a good start to stop. I don't know, and just hear people for people and what they have to say, and if it feels good for you, then go with that, versus think like, oh, it feels good, but it's against my belief or what I think, so.
Right. We're almost encouraging people to, I guess it's kind of similar to treat people how you would want to be treated. Well, don't necessarily label someone if you would not want to be labeled in a certain way.
So I don't know. That's just my little thought.
No, that's everyone has a well worth it thought to be heard. Megan, any thoughts about that? Anything you'd like
with
to
everything so far about the point about the labels was excellent. I think we get so hung up on labeling and about I don't even know what the word is, but like that causes the divide. As soon as you label somebody, they're different than you.
Yeah.
They're not anywhere on the same playing field with you anymore.
Yeah.
And I think there's no way our people are going to come together until we can start to stop doing that. And I think of people like on my Facebook, right, that are, I know them as people. I know them outside of the online world, and they're beautiful, wonderful people who do all kinds of good things in the world and would welcome any person into their home for a meal. And yet, when it comes to politics, they stick to a certain party, right? And all of a sudden, I'm like, you're not the evil person that you're looking like you are.
We all have a few of those. I know
because I know that's not, and I know, like we said earlier, that just because you're that party doesn't mean you're racist or you're,
No, it doesn't. No.
And so that label immediately puts you in that camp. And a wonderful point about the labels. Yeah. And
that's
I like the idea.
Step back too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's almost like, I think it's, again, going back to labeling or putting someone in a box. It's no different, because that has nothing to do with political ideology. Let's as a black man in this country, let me be clear. Yeah. Neither party is a friend of the program. Okay. So to be absolutely fair, those things have nothing to do with humanity or
Yeah.
basic human decency, right? Understanding
Yeah.
someone for who they are, right?
Yeah.
That's just I had to put it out there. Um, is this true? But I'd love where like man, this is a great opening to simply just like inviting people to I think take in the mirror maybe, you know, inviting people to think about what if that was you on the other side of who you're spewing this anger and hate at. So if I want to share something because I think it's very critical to people dealing with the feelings of anger and hate. And again, it's very personal. So back in 2006 when I lost my sister, right? It was due to complications of diabetes. But the body begins to shut down, all these things, and that was rough for me because and I guess just like with anyone else, when you lose a loved one or someone that you care about, it hurts and you're angry. But it's not that someone murdered her. It's other than this disease, it started to take her body away, and so how do you look so hard for something or someone to blame and there's nothing to blame. There's no one to blame. I even tried it before of blaming certain people for her death, and it's not real. um so I kind of encourage people to uh, like I don't know. I don't know if I had the magic. Well, there is no magic phrase for dealing with uh, anger, right? And frustration and hurt and all of those negative feelings. But I encourage people to not blame something or someone because that continues to fuel the anger and rage unnecessarily. And it gives it power when I think the best thing to do is take the power back. Acknowledge that you're angry and that it sucks and it's shitty, but also acknowledge that there was nothing that could be done about it. And that's okay. And the best thing that you can do is really to honor like that person you lost, right? Or in the other sense that we're talking about here, okay, if you are angry and hurt about some serious deep political ideologies, well, become part of something productive to help work together as opposed to pointing a finger and blaming someone for what might be happening to you. Does that like
as
did
an
I would
as an
I hope I was able to
ideology
tie
that
that.
sounds beautiful and perfect. I think when it falls into application, the buck
Mm-hmm.
stops at the feet of every single individual. But
Yes.
no matter
Yes.
how much we wish it to be the case, we can expect that nobody else, not a single person, is going to do the internal work that it requires to own that buck. And so,
That's
from
true.
my perspective, then 100%, and you know what? I invite you to call me
Mm-hmm.
out on, a white privilege perspective, right?
Sure. Sure.
But 100% of the onus of moving forward falls at the feet of me, of you, of
Mm-hmm.
everybody, of every individual. But since I can only control myself, then it only falls on me. And where that where that
Absolutely right.
comes in is learning how to be the master of my own emotional state. Because while it's not productive to deny an emotion, it is similarly not productive to allow an emotional state to own us. And let me tell you where I learned this from, because I think the source of it is super important. It's from one of my teachers who, at 5 years old, was kidnapped by the Chinese and put into a prison camp, and grew up in that prison camp until he was about 28. And
so basically the formative years. Okay.
yeah. And
yeah, I was
in
like,
that prison
seriously.
camp, he watched people he loved be tortured and killed. I mean, these ideas, these practices to be applied, come from and have been applied in the worst of circumstances. And he told me one time, you know, I was never actually unhappy there. I never hated any of the guards who beat us or tortured us or never had hate for them. And so I think to myself, all right, well, my petty little sob story is nothing, right? So if he can be there, then what can I do with it? You know? And
Sure.
so application then, right?
You know what, man, I think that actually, I think that hits the nail on the head. It's not about a comparison of your story to his story, or Megan's or mine or Janelle's, whoever. I think that's part of the issue. I think it's difficult to own it. It's difficult. We all, I think that those of us on this podcast right now know that it's difficult to own it. It really is. But that's where you have to start, instead of, again, pointing that finger to, because talking about your story you just talked about, he could have easily blamed the guards and hated. I mean, and would be justified, right? I mean, we would all be like, yeah, I
hate
get
those
why you
guards
did.
for you.
Like, seriously, that's real. And not to bring it like so personal for me, but yeah, I feel the same way about how I could feel in this country. I totally understand how anyone does. But I guess, do you want to continue in the same way that has always been? Or do you really want to see something change? And in order to see something change, you have to ask yourself, are you ready to change?
And sadly, the responsibility falls on the victim to forgive the victimizer.
Yeah.
Because we're the ones, generally, the victim, not that I'm a big victim, but the victims in general are the ones who are first responding to the desire to change. Like, we got to change the situation. We have to heal the divide.
Right.
We have to take that responsibility. And so, like, for practice, right? Or for application of that, I moved up here to northern Idaho. It is an incredibly it's a pretty unified area, unified in the direction of hatred, sadly, and carrying weapons in order to, show you're part of that group. No, it is
to get your point across.
I lived in the ghetto in St. Louis. I see more guns out at breakfast here than I did living in the hood in St. Louis. All right. So but when I first came out here, I was feeling really out of place and like almost scared. And then I started people with whatever, guns all over up in their car, and then they looked like they needed a hand, and I'd stop and I'd give them a hand. And then it was this perspective of a dehumanization and me feeling as other. Like I had categorized. And then I started just being nice. And so I started actually going out of my way to do acts of kindness.
Brings us full circle.
Which, dude, literally.
Yeah.
Exactly, Megan. Yeah. So that was what I was mentioning. I think you might have gotten cut off for a second, but that's exactly what I was mentioning after you had kicked us off with the discussion. That's what was like beating in my head, man. That's what was, how do we bridge this gap? What is like a first step? How do we get people to begin to trust other humans again? Right? As you said, it's been so dehumanizing. How do you get us to see each other as humans again? And I think I think an applicable step is really, and again, for anyone listening, for the listeners, or even those of us on this podcast, spreading this message and then actually doing it ourselves, is a scheduled random act of kindness. A scheduled, and it sounds crazy to eat. I'm saying it, and I'm sitting here saying, that sounds nuts. but again, if we are trying to be this change that we want to see, and we're trying to have this move towards healing and getting better and changing things for the better, we have to be it and have to do it. And so, yes, man, random acts of kindness will get people to see, wow, I didn't deserve that. And I got that. And then it hopefully what happens is it's that ripple effect that's called paying it forward, right? The next time this random stranger that you provided this act of kindness for will then see another stranger, and there will be that little spidey sense that tingles like, oh, wait a minute. Someone did something nice for me just because. Maybe this is the time I should do something nice for this person. And I think that ripple effect is a really good start.
That's such a beautiful way to to approach this. Like, there's so many people out right now that when you come to the issues at hand, they're so in your face and negative, and that just shuts people down. The people that want to learn and that want to respond and that want to do good things, it shuts them down, and then they crawl back into their hole and nothing changes.
They move, they go back to inaction out of fear. Yeah, that is a great point. Let's take a quick break and let's continue this part, because Megan, hopefully I can share something that we went through back in May, if you don't mind. Okay. All right, let's take a break and we'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back from that break. Man, good discussion so far, you guys, about just like the divide that's going on. But I think we really brought it home with how to at least begin to bridge the gap. I think it's a matter of seeing people for them actually being people and not trying to demonize them or dehumanize them. We all have feelings. We all have a lot of the same fears, frustrations. So a little empathy goes a long way. So before we continue the rest of that discussion, or actually before we move into what being in action is like, right? What being involved and being engaged is like, I would like to introduce another person to the round table. Sarah, how are you?
Good. Thanks for asking. How are you doing?
Good. So I think what we want to talk about, what we kind of want to address now, right, is being in action on moving things forward, on helping, on being engaged in your community. Also keeping what's really critical now to the country is keeping our elected officials accountable and really accountable, and not just elected officials federally, right? That's a little we're very distant from that. But yeah, at the local level, absolutely. Absolutely. Um Before we get into that discussion, I just want to give a quick backstory. Um, Again, I think this was all of us on this podcast have been moved to action in some way from back in May when George Floyd was murdered. And I, as a black man, I put a post out there, really just kind of unpacking my everything about it. Um, and I was joined by Henry, who messaged me privately and was like, "Man, I'm with you. I'm trying to be accountable. What do we need to do to make change happen?" So, yes,
As
yes.
a white man riddled with guilt.
Well, maybe just a tad bit of guilt.
No, but really feeling like seeing the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's time to stop.
That's right.
Sitting
Right.
on the side.
No, he totally jumped in, both feet. And so simultaneously, other friends were in conversation with me. So that's where Megan also comes in. And by the way, for our listeners, it's funny that Henry, Megan, and I are all from the same coaching class from our coach training, Health Coach Institute. So there's a bit of a connection there. But so also Megan and I were in some conversations, and to your point, Megan, before we took a break about how to bridge this gap, and there are people who want to act, but then they are met with I don't know, anger, or met with frustration from the people they're trying to help. Can you speak to that? Like, what does that do? Because I know that was part of what you were feeling, I think.
Yeah. I think speaking as a white woman, a white middle class suburban housewife.
Sure.
I think when the death of George Floyd happened, and so many of us were feeling that so deeply, and such shock, that yes, we should have been paying attention much earlier. And there were times that we were, but for us, I'm in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. So, I mean, this was in my backyard. So that made it even more real from the very moment before it was even on the news. I saw a video of it.
Both you and Sarah are same place, right?
Yeah.
Sarah?
Yep. We're in Zingtown.
Sure.
So anyway, yeah, like as soon as that happened, it was so real and so visceral, you could just feel. And I wanted to do something right away. And so, but I was frozen. Like I didn't know what are the next steps, what are the steps that are going to be met with open arms and not, oh, you're just trying to save the world now. Right. Which is one of those views. Yep.
Or better yet, you're trying to cure your own guilt.
Right. Right. Like... Yes. Yeah. All of those ideas that, yes, I think they apply to a lot of us. But sometimes you actually have this genuine, I want to do something. And there were a few places that as either I reached out or I saw other people reaching out to basically say, man, I want to do something. What can I do? And it was met with such anger and such frustration. Frustration was the perfect word for that. exactly the things we were just saying. You're just trying to assuage your guilt. You're just trying to. But for some people, when they meet that frustration and their anger, it shuts them down. Right? Like you could immediately go, okay, well, I'm just going to go back to my hole then and pretend this isn't happening in the world.
Right.
And luckily, you know, those of us that continued to reach out found other people that were like, oh, yeah, okay, so this is what we need you to do. We need you to keep using your voice and we need you to keep learning. And I think back to your original point of the only way to change things is through love and gratitude. And we need to bring people in. And without doing that, we shut down so many opportunities. So
totally agree. So
I love your idea of the random acts of kindness.
It's so true, and I think it's so unexpected that it breaks down that wall of defensiveness right away.
Yes.
Because you sit there and you're like, how is someone who I have no idea who they are doing something nice for me? And at first you might question it. And at first you think, no, this isn't right. Something's wrong. So I get that too.
Yeah.
But the more we can, again, have that ripple effect, it builds into a wave. And then if it builds into a wave, it can crash walls. I mean, I know I'm being a little bit dramatic, but
I like it though. Yes.
That's kind of the,
you know, there's an interesting series of studies that were done, and at the moment the university, I think it was like the University of Southern California or something like that, but there were a number of studies done on entrainment of the electromagnetic field of people's hearts.
Okay.
Right. And so there was one group of people who were given a photo of another person, and the other group of people, the photos, were in a completely different room. Both sets of people were untrained with, mindfulness and concentration, et cetera, et cetera. But they were first led through a guided meditation into just bringing their awareness into their heart, and then letting that expand, and then connecting that with the heart of the person in the photo. And 100% of the people in the experiment had a physiological response.
Wow.
I mean, there was biochemical cascades were just flowing, people reducing stress, all of these things. And, as coaches or as people going out to do random acts of kindness, right? And I keep these types of things in my mind when I do them. Actually, intentionally connecting heart to heart makes a whole new level of difference that I've noticed with people who are, I'm talking angry, old veterans who
are set in their ways,
have 3 guns in their belt, and they just brighten up. And there's ways that we can bolster our effect.
I agree.
And our effectiveness. And even when someone shoots you down, or they are rude, which is gonna happen. Just like Megan, it sounds like you experience. Like, I'm trying to help.
Right, exactly.
But still, with that open heart, it actually, people are concerned about becoming vulnerable. But with a truly open heart, we become less vulnerable. We expose ourselves, and that's makes us Teflon.
That's the beauty of it. So anyway. That's awesome, man, because that is what we're doing here. That is what all of us are doing here, honestly.
And it's not just crystal hugging, hibbledy-pibbledy. It's backed up by hard scientific evidence.
I want to jump into that. Sarah, are you still with us there?
Yep, I'm here.
So if you could kind of speak to, and first of all, I do want to say that On a personal level, I am so proud of both you and Megan for I guess learning, but continuing to step up and not let those things that we were talking about, Megan, right? Not let those stop you, because that's what's important. If you want it to stop you, then it will. And like you said, you crawl back into your little bubble and life goes on, right?
Yep.
But man, you guys being in, I guess for me, that kind of became ground zero, although we know that's not ground zero for anything 2020.
Right.
That was the match that lit the powder keg, if you will. And so it's been in your backyard for a lot longer than any of us. And just so Sarah, if you could speak to that, man, like how have you dealt with either being inactive about things and then jumping into action with what you felt you were called to help with?
Okay, yeah. When George Floyd was murdered by the police, it was like a springboard I hit, and I just couldn't stop after that. It's one thing to realize that you've been ignoring shit and you haven't done anything for a long time. And I think that
Yeah.
can be paralyzing alone, like just knowing that what you haven't done for so long for your fellow humans.
Yeah.
And Megan, I've been met with a lot of kind of the same vibes you're talking about with, why should we trust you? Why do you want to help us? You're doing it for yourself. And there's a lot of times that I did have to check myself and be like, get in the right headspace. This isn't about making yourself feel good. It's about doing the right thing for your community and, just other human beings who are trying to have their basic human rights met.
Doing what's right because it's
Yeah,
right.
it's really as simple as that, and
Yeah.
there's people on either side of things who will always have like logical reasons why you shouldn't do one thing or another. But for me, it's about my intuition. And so I just try to follow that. And it's brought me to meet a lot of great people, just from making medical packs to help with our homeless population had spiked after that happened. And it's still just like thousands of people out in the cold, unhoused. So helping with that and then just showing up at protests, plugging in different coalitions that are anti-hate and anti-racism, and just, wherever I'm needed, trying to be there.
Sure. Hopefully, when you've been at protests, having a mask and kind of distance.
100%.
Just as I know, it's kind of hard to be distanced at a rally or at a protest, but at least if you got a face covering,
I never saw anyone. I never saw anyone at the protests I've been to that just didn't wear a mask. So I think, that's helpful. Plenty of hand sanitizer, but when it's at the level that it's at, like I still had to show up, and I know it meant a lot to other people that we would show up.
That you showed up. Absolutely. That's showing up is way more important than people think at times. Man, no, that's it. And Megan, I was just sharing this with you before we started recording today. I came across something, you guys, and it was using the word ACT as an acronym, right? It's actions change things. I was like, man, that is so simple. It's powerful.
And action changes thoughts as well, so that both work together.
There you go. Exactly. So if we're trying to help bridge this gap, and we are all being in action, right? But it's the acts that we're going to do that's going to change people's thoughts and things. That's what we are trying to do to get. And I think you can't do it alone either. That's what is the hard part. And I know actually Sarah and I were in this conversation the other day about this, just briefly. But the hard part is it's not calling people out. The hard part is not calling bullshit. The hard part is then calling them
Right.
in.
Yeah.
And now, okay, how can you be part of the solution
Right.
with me? You know, obviously, I think we've had some really, really great discussions on how to bridge that gap. I mean, they're talking about intuition. We're talking about random acts of kindness. Henry, you have given us some great examples of the random acts of kindness, man. And actually, well, and not just giving the examples, but I mean, we're giving these life examples. We're hopefully proving to our listeners that we're living it. We're not just
Right.
talking about it. We're actually being in action. If you guys don't mind, I want to go ahead and jump into another break real quick.
Yeah.
And when we come back, I want to go ahead and put some things out there of some maybe I don't want to call them initiatives. That seems really big, but just some things that we're all doing to continue to move things forward. If you guys are with that.
Sounds good.
You guys are cool with that.
Yep.
Sounds good.
All right. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back from our break. Man, it's I always think every episode is going to be okay. You know what? We've talked about some heavy things. It's going to get a little bit lighter. Let's even though we laugh about stuff, but we've had a really, really good discussion so far, and I appreciate everybody who is on our roundtable here. And for the listeners, I really do hope you guys have found some really good insights into what we're trying to get across and what we're trying to share. I'd like to touch on, if anybody wants to take this one, what are some things that you are into right now that is action in moving forward, whether it's whether it's helping the community move forward as you guys have already done, or we are in a transition period to a new administration. And is there anything that you guys are part of or have thoughts about for accountability, or even if it's some other things that we've talked about that have not had anything to do with the administration, but maybe like social justice, anything like that, or anything at all? Anybody want to touch on that first?
Reading books and following different people online and like learning as much as I can about the obvious things that I didn't understand before. And through that, it's been starting a lot of conversations that are enlightening to me, but also I'm able to be sharing this information with other people who think they have it all figured out, right? I have some great friends who are very socially active and have a lot of opinions, but sometimes there's new things to learn, and it's really fun to bring that to the conversation. And
bring a fresh perspective,
and just to enlighten those conversations, which then spread. It's like it just keeps going. And that makes it really exciting. And I think about like voting this year in my local elections. It was probably one of the first times I've really sat down and looked at all the social aspects to the candidates where, in the past, I don't know that I thought that much about that. But I think.
Right. Well, that's
right.
Where, that's where you have the most impact.
I was going to say the same thing. It's good to connect with like a local grassroots that works on keeping our local elected officials accountable. And there's some really great ones in our area, and they're pretty organized, which is nice because it's like they tell you what they need from you and when they need it and make it happen.
Nice.
Well, you know what? That's Henry. You remember our last episode? We had talked about we were talking to Corinne. This was about
Corinne was
actually.
Awesome.
Yeah,
in fact, after that one, I'm running for public office on the next go-round. No joke.
she's my cousin in Florida, cousin through marriage, and she's highly active and she's great. We're obviously going to bring her back on. Couldn't make this one, but it touches to what you guys are talking about with just the local election, right? It is, yes, the general election or federal election, if you will, that's definitely important as we see record turnout this last federal election. But you can be so much more impactful locally.
Yeah.
That affects your day to day, and not just your day to day, but your community. What happened to everybody in that community, right? And so it's so important. And that's also awesome, Sarah, to hear that being part of the grassroots movements.
They really are.
Yes, they are organized, and they make it easy for you to show up, right? And that's the thing. Most people are so. Even to Megan's point, anyone listening who feels stuck right now, anyone listening who feels what's next. This is kind of what we're talking about. What is next after you vote? Like there was this big push, right? Like, yeah, it's vote, vote, vote. And now personally, I got 4 people registered who voted. So I think one of the important things, man, is to now we can't lose the momentum, right? Again, it's been this go vote, go vote. Well, that has proven out. That's been done. So what happens next? What do you do? What do you look at? Do you say, all right, now is it back to, well, for most of us, it might be back to quarantine, and that's fine. But keep an eye on different policies that get passed in your community. Read it. We all got a little bit of time. Just about everybody's community has some kind of newsletter, website, something that you can find what's happening, what's going on. It's public record. So, as I've said on a couple blog posts of mine, if you want to split your scrolling time on Instagram and Facebook, knock off 5 minutes of that to actually search for the local things that you need to scroll through, to find out how to be more involved, how to be more civically active, because it doesn't just stop with the vote. We have to, if our officials and different communities and locally are not performing the tasks for the greater good of that community, then we change it again. Like it's a moving thing. It's a flexible thing. There's not just one static vision for how communities are. The people are all different, so the way that they're governed and the way that things have to happen needs to be flexible and open. I invite everybody to do that. If I could share with you guys something that I'm really looking forward to back in my hometown in Ohio. I thought about this a lot, and again, I'm sorry for bringing up things of having lost family members, right? But I just lost my mom a little bit over a month ago, and one of my friends was telling me that, man, I could see why you're not coming back here because you've pretty much lost everybody, right? And at one point, I was like, yeah, I don't know why am I going to come back here? But immediately, like almost immediately after I thought that, I was like, no, you know what? My community actually needs me, even though I haven't lived there in 20 some years. but they need me, and this is what I'm doing first. I'm putting together, and I mentioned this to Henry just in a text or so, but I'm putting together a program, and I'm going to talk to the police department about putting together a coaching program that will that I will enroll these young men, well, specifically young men at first, who might have misdemeanors. Instead of having to do jail time or punishment for misdemeanors, let's put them through a coaching program. Let's retrain the mind, right? Let's help them become more productive, because that's what's going to help the community more than, okay, you get this misdemeanor charge, then you are in trouble. That doesn't change why the behavior happens.
It starts the cycle.
It doesn't get
starts the downward cycle.
Yeah, right. Yes, and luckily, being one of those who had misdemeanors before, and, and luckily, I know it's so shocking, right? Luckily, having had people in my corner and who were able to show me a different way, right? Parents included in that, but not just parents. Yeah, like that's what my community needs. And so why shouldn't I be the one to be part of that? Or, so again, I'm not exactly sure how it's going to play out, but that is a tangible thing that I'm working on this moment to provide. And I think I'm trying to develop it so that it can be taken to other communities as well. I think that is a really, really good, I don't want to call it a compromise, but it's a much better form of evolution than just punishment.
Absolutely.
I think. And again, we're not talking like these high felonious things. I mean, misdemeanors we're talking
loitering,
and yeah, right.
No, I mean, for real though.
Like,
we used to get busted for loitering all the time, and it's got
right. And there are plenty of
judges.
Right. There are judges and lawyers who see the character of some of these guys, kids who get misdemeanors, and they try to help them do better, right? So why not provide a resource to help them do that? That's a serious thing I'm working on. Locally here, I'm in DC, by the way, but locally I'm working on a coaching program for my daughter's school. We're revisiting how to kind of put that together for, I mean, as you all know, 2020 has been a shit show for education. and both the kids and teachers alike. I mean, my gosh. So I'm working on a program for that to help the staff, and possibly even branching it out to parents for stress management and actually taking them through several sessions, and I know those may not necessarily be political things, but those are things that help your community. Those are things that are going to help, as this podcast is named. Yeah. That's what's going to help move the needle. That it gets it to that next notch. It's not going to be perfect, but if I'm not going to do it and I see the need for it, well, what does that make me if I'm not going to act on it? So, yeah, I got some irons in the fire, man. I'm inspired. I'm engaged. I'm trying to do what's right because it's the right
I've
thing
been
to do.
working on some stuff, and I have quotes of Viktor Frankl in front of me. And one of, the Holocaust survivor. Yeah. So one of his quotes is, "What is to give light must endure burning." And I think of you going back to your hometown after all the grief you've had there, to bring light with this new program idea. And that's amazing. What a gift. What a gift.
Yeah. It's born out of that, right? Well, that's like you and I talked about, off podcast. I had shared with you the whole, like all the losses that I've had. And I don't think anyone would blame me if they were like, okay, cool. Go do your thing wherever that is, right? I mean, I can't say I would blame myself, but at the same time, would I be the person I am without that community?
Right.
So now's not the time to turn my back. Not even close. Now's the time to plant my feet and dig in.
What are the things that have formed us in our life that might have been that burning, and how do we bring light to others from that?
Sure.
And even if issues that we're facing
Absolutely.
now, and how to share that positivity and that love with other people, regardless of what circumstances or, you know, anything like that. If we want that unity, where have we experienced life in such a way to learn from it and bring light to others?
You are absolutely right. It is
Yeah.
it is sharing and spreading that light to others. I will leave it to, I'll toss it to you guys. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with before we wrap it up?
I think I just did mine.
Don't everybody go at once.
Share the light, people.
Fair enough. Nice.
I am.
Henry, you still with us there?
Think of something, but nothing's coming at the moment. You know, I've got a lot going on myself, but I think we've delivered in a big way today, and I don't want to kick off a whole new discussion on accident.
That's right. We've got plenty of episodes down the road, people. We got plenty of episodes down the road for sure.
I really appreciate, anybody who takes the time to think about the things that we're saying and to join, or, maybe if somebody's feeling at a loss at that moment, that there's something, just get a hold of Lee. Come be a guest on our podcast. If you don't know how to do anything else,
absolutely,
then just come and join the voice. And
absolutely, that's part of getting into
something
action.
Small,
absolutely,
something doable. And then I really appreciate you, Lee, of course, and I really appreciate you also, Megan, for joining in today. And it's great that we all have this connection that's really wonderful. And now perhaps that connection's taking itself to another level where we're transferring it into making a change. So I celebrate all of that. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Henry.
Well said, man. Absolutely. I that's it. We will wrap it up. That was it right there. I do want to invite our listeners. Again, there are some future initiatives that Move the Needle wants to achieve, and we're talking future for sure. But there is listener support. If you're listening to this podcast and you go to the website on Anchor, and if you're not sure, go to liveallgood.com, and you can find how to access the link for listener support. If like Henry said, if you even don't want to join and you're not sure what to do, you can donate, and we will make sure that 100% of the donation is actually going to go to these initiatives of we're looking at a scholarship in the future for students. We're looking at potential training programs in the future. So yeah, people, if you don't know how to get involved, if you want to financially help support those initiatives, and again, 100% of those donations goes to supporting that, please reach out. It's liveallgood.com. You can email liveallgood44@gmail.com, however you need to reach out. You guys, this has been another wonderful episode of Move the Needle. I appreciate everybody who's been on the roundtable today, and we will see you next month. So everybody, in the meantime, please enjoy this month's podcast. Stay safe and be well.